On the 22nd of April, 1944, nearly 30,000 American soldiers embarked on a massive training exercise in the south of England. It was a large-scale rehearsal for one of the most crucial military operations of World War II. It was a practice run of D-Day. The exercise was designed to be tough, to harden them for battle, to prepare them for the daring beach assault they would soon have to carry out in order to enter German-occupied France. But, as it turned out, many of those participating would never make it to D-Day. This training exercise would end in an almost unimaginable disaster. World War II began in 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. The next year, German troops surged west and took much of France. Allied troops who had hoped to stop the German advance were surrounded and forced towards the coast, where many were evacuated across the Channel to Britain. France fell shortly thereafter, and for a time things looked bleak for the Allies. Over the next few years, the USA joined the battle, and many conflicts were fought in other theatres. However, Germany retained its grip on much of Western Europe. Everyone knew that at some point the Allies would likely try to retake occupied territories, most likely with a seaborne attack from the UK into France. For years, Britain built up its forces, organised and planned for what became known as D-Day, the day when Allied forces would cross the Channel, storm the beaches of Normandy, and begin the long march to Berlin to hopefully end the war. Naturally, troops needed to train and prepare for this unprecedented beach assault. One such training exercise was Operation Tiger, carried out in late April 1944 at Slapton Sands in Devon. This location was chosen because the terrain closely resembled Utah Beach, the beach that the men would be assaulting on D-Day. The exercise as a whole would be a very good simulation of what they might experience. Around 30,000 American troops would rehearse organizing themselves and embarking on ships. These ships would sail slowly from ports on the south coast of the UK to Slapton Sands, mimicking a journey across the Channel, and then the troops on board would make a mock assault on the beach there. To increase the realism of the exercise and harden the men for battle, they would do so immediately after a real naval bombardment of the beach, and with live rounds of ammunition being fired over their heads. While this training operation was being carried out, the area would be protected by multiple Allied ships. This was both to keep the troops in training safe from enemy action, and to prevent the enemy finding out about the exercise, and in doing so, learning that D-Day was imminent. That was the plan. But in reality, the exercise played out very differently. From the 22nd to the 25th of April, troops, vehicles and equipment were staged at ports along the south coast. To increase realism, all vehicles were fully fueled, and troops carried bulky backpacks loaded with all of the equipment that they would carry during the real assault on D-Day. They were loaded onto dozens of ships which set sail along the coast for Slapton Sands. They arrived at first light on the 27th of April, but here a miscommunication took place. Some ships were slightly delayed, and it was decided that the exercise should be set back by 1 hour. Originally, there would have been a naval bombardment at 6:30 a.m., followed by a simulated beach assault at 7:30 a.m. Now the plan called for a naval bombardment at 7:30 a.m., followed by a simulated beach assault at 8:30 a.m. Not all ships received this update, and tragically, some troops went ashore at 7:30 a.m., as per the original plan. They were caught in the naval bombardment and suffered a number of friendly fire casualties. The exact number killed is not recorded. Despite this unfortunate and fatal mistake, the exercise continued. A second wave of ships departed from ports along the south coast, forming a convoy consisting of 8 transport vessels known as landing ship tanks, or LSTs. These were designed to carry large numbers of tanks, other vehicles, and foot soldiers, and to be able to land them directly on shallow beaches. LSTs were, unfortunately, slow-moving and vulnerable to enemy attack, so the convoy would also be joined by 2 escort ships, the HMS Azalea and the HMS Scimitar. However, at the very last moment before the convoy departed, the HMS Scimitar was damaged in an accidental collision and could not be used. Command for the operation was shared between British and American forces. In theory, commanders on either side could call off the exercise due to the missing escorts, but neither did. Preparing the men for D-Day was seen as simply too vital. The convoy went ahead with just 1 escort. This left the LSTs very poorly defended. German forces had observed an increase in activity on the south coast of the UK and now noted the departure of a slow-moving convoy with just 1 corvette to defend it. It was a target that was too good to pass up. 6 German S-boats, fast, well-armed attack vessels, were dispatched to attack the convoy. In the vicinity of Lyme Bay, in the very early hours of the 28th of April, the approaching S-boats were detected in the waters near the convoy. However, due to confusion regarding radio use during this covert exercise, this information did not reach the LSTs in time. Ship LST-507 was the first to be hit by a torpedo from one of the attacking S-boats. The engine room was destroyed in a massive explosion, and fire quickly spread to the vehicle deck, consuming the fully fueled vehicles therein. The LST was almost defenseless against the much more maneuverable S-boats. Within half an hour, it was abandoned and partially sunk beneath the waves of the English Channel. The rest of the convoy came under attack. Another LST was hit by 2 torpedoes and sank within just 6 minutes, taking almost its entire crew of nearly 500 men with it. 2 other LSTs were hit and damaged, with one also suffering damage as a result of friendly fire as the crews of the transport ships desperately tried to defend themselves in the dark and the chaos. Once aware of the attack, the convoy began to zigzag and made for shallow water close to the coast. 4 LSTs escaped undamaged, and 2 made it back to port with significant damage and some casualties. Left behind in Lyme Bay were 2 LSTs that had been utterly destroyed, each of which had been carrying more than 400 men apiece. Some of these men had burned or drowned on board their sinking ships during the battle. Many more had survived only by jumping into the cold waters of the English Channel. With almost no time to prepare, soldiers hadn't been able to dispose of their bulky packs, and in many cases had resorted to wearing their lifebelts around their waists. This was disastrous. If their waterlogged equipment didn't drag them down, in many cases the buoyant lifebelt around their waist would cause them to flip upside down when they entered the water, plunging their heads beneath the waves and resulting in their death from drowning. Those that did survive then had to await rescue in the cold and dark. As minutes ticked by, more and more men perished from hypothermia. The survivors of what should have been a training exercise were left in a sea of floating bodies. LST-515 returned to the scene to attempt to rescue some of the sailors around 2 hours after the battle, once the crew was certain that the S-boats were not still lurking. By this time, many of those they hoped to rescue had succumbed to hypothermia, or been dragged into the depths by their sodden clothing and equipment. Relatively few were rescued from the water. In total, it was estimated that at least 700 servicemen had passed away as a combined result of the Lyme Bay attack and the friendly fire incident at Slapton Sands the day before. In the end, Operation Tiger proved a poor rehearsal for D-Day. Many of the men who survived were forced to relive the horror they had experienced when the real invasion of France went ahead on the 6th of June 1944. Casualties at Utah Beach during the real operation were, In the end, slightly lower than casualties during the training exercise, with just 589 American soldiers killed, wounded, or recorded as missing. Those who lost their lives during Operation Tiger were reported as having died in action. Due to the extreme need for secrecy in the lead-up to D-Day, details of what went wrong during the exercise were not revealed until long after the war had ended. At first look, the botched exercise might seem like a pointless waste of life. But it did result in some meaningful action before D-Day. The carnage of Operation Tiger made the Allies aware of how vulnerable LSTs were to S-boats, and a concerted campaign was carried out to bomb German ports and take as many S-boats as possible out of action. Lifebelt training for soldiers was also improved, and the use of radios was standardized to prevent miscommunications. Today, you can find memorials in Devon and Normandy to the men who lost their lives in preparation for one of the most crucial battles in modern history.